questions about liquid and why it might be something to consider using to feed the cattle, since all the conditions we got going on, high prices, drought. So if you guys got questions, let me know. I'll try to answer them. If I don't know, I'll get the answer for you. A little bit about myself. My name is Irwin Brunius. I was born and raised in Holland. Grew up there for the first 24 years of my life. I got a degree in livestock production. That picture is actually one I took, when was that, 4 years ago. Me and my wife were in Holland. 70% of Holland is below sea level. So we're standing on a dike here, the ocean's on the other side, and they kind of use these old windmills back in the day to pump the water out. Yeah, I thought it was a nice picture, and there's a town right back there. That's where my parents live and still live. Molasses. You guys heard about the Great Molasses Flood? It's funny when you start Googling stuff on molasses and you're looking for pictures, you find all sorts of stuff. So apparently in 1919 in Boston, there was a huge accident on a tank that exploded. 11 dead, 50 hurt. 2,300,000 gallons of molasses swooped through, tank broke, took everything out. What happened? It was, as you can see, it was January, Boston, cold. Had a full tank, cold molasses. They had a new shipment coming in, filled it up with warm molasses. It was a closed off tank. Started forming some gas, and the whole thing blew up. And the funny thing about molasses is when it's cold, you can't do anything with it. So, a little bit of history. So yeah, old tanks, don't use them a lot. Quick tip. So what have I done? I done university in Holland. I ran a dairy farm in Germany for a couple of years. Out of that dairy farm, we sold a whole bunch of heifers to Russia. So I did some consulting in Russia, just east of Moscow. You can't see on the map. After I got done with that, I managed another dairy in England. Spent another couple of years there. Done with that, didn't know what I wanted to do. Back as when I was 12, 13, I worked for a dairy farmer in Holland. He used to ride my bike, go feed calves and clean barn and all that stuff. He decided to move to Olds, so I called him, said, "You need some help?" I said, "Sure." So I applied for a work permit, which is really hard. They complain about Americans, but try to get into Canada. I think it cost me about $10,000, and I don't know, police checks. They want police checks on my parents. But all's done, I'm here. That was 14 years ago. Didn't speak a word English when I came here, well, a little bit, but I still had to stop in the parking lot at Tim Hortons to kind of practice how I would order my coffee. So if anybody immigrates to Canada and learn the language, it's not that hard. I could do it. So fast forward 14 years, married a newfie. So my kids are going to have a real funny accent. And started working in the feed industry here. So, Westway. We are kind of the company that is not very good at advertising and kind of the unknown until people need us. So where did Westway come from? Westway, everybody knows, well, most guys know Molasses from back in the day, right? It's that big layer of sludge in the bottom of the tank at the end of the year. Molasses was bought by Cargill. I don't know how many years ago, but it must have been 25, 30 years ago. Cargill had a liquid division back then. They operated out of High River. And then about 15, 20 years ago, Westway came in and bought the liquid division from Cargill. So we are still kind of, through the years, Molasses. So Westway is, maybe not known, but we're the largest liquid feed manufacturer in North America. And that is just share tons that we do throughout Mexico, the US, and Canada. And what that does is that just gives us buying power. Right? We can get our products volume's cheaper. So Westway is owned by a British company, ED&F Man. ED&F Man is a sugar, coffee, steel trading company. Molasses was a byproduct from sugar. They needed an outlet for that, so they came up with feeding it to livestock. And that's part of what we do. A lot of what we do is industrial. So basically, ED&F Man buys it, transports it, sells it. That's what they make their money on. Important facts. This is basically what they do. They're in 60 countries. Funny thing is that the financial office is in Holland. So anytime things get a little tough for the company, I tell them I'll call the boss in Holland, and they get a little sketchy. So we are backed up by a very large global company. As far as North America, where we're located, this is a old map. We have pretty good spread out in the States. In Canada, it's an old map. Our current plant is in Lethbridge. Last year, November, we closed our plant in Weyburn. We didn't close that because we were losing business. We closed that because the thing is with the molasses, we use a combination of sugar beet molasses and cane molasses. The sugar beet molasses comes out of southern Alberta, and the cane molasses comes out of Seattle. So the products that we would ship to Weyburn would first go to Lethbridge, and from Lethbridge to Weyburn. Weyburn needed a lot of updates, and basically it's cheaper to just manufacture in Lethbridge and then ship to the customers out east. So there's a pretty good spread around the States. We have a couple of dry plants where we make some blocks, beet pulp. I don't know if you guys heard of Sweet 45. One of the more famous products from Westway. This is our Lethbridge plant. We got a drone for my birthday, so I took it to Lethbridge, but that takes you 6 months before you can fly a drone because it's always windy. So the office in front, we have a railway siding where cane molasses comes in. This side here, which is basically this side, is our unloading area. These are all our commodities. These are our tanks of cane and beet. We unload the trucks and the rail cars here. We have a scale in the back. So trucks get scaled in. They drive under loading tanks. We top load. We head out. A lot of tanks. We recently acquired this property here to expand because we can only fit 3 cars on our siding, and we just need more room. Building next to it here is our dry storage, so where all our vitamins, minerals, and trace minerals get added. So it doesn't really look like your typical feed mill, but it is because everything is in a closed system. Everything is piped, valves, pumped. And it's a good location to be in because we're right next to the beet growers in southern Alberta. So like I said, we use a mixture of sugarcane molasses and beet molasses. The only reason we do that is because cows don't like beet molasses. I don't know if you've ever driven past Tabor where they make the sugar. It's got this really distinct, bitter, I don't know, it kind of smells a bit like the liquid here. Cows just get turned away from it. You cannot. Every year I got a couple producers say, no, I just want straight beef. All right, we'll do it. And by accident, they won't. So the only problem is sugarcane molasses is 3 times the price as beet molasses. So if we would go with straight cane molasses, we'd be looking at triple the price of try to least cost it with the beet molasses, because nutritionally they're pretty identical. So molasses, the only thing that differentiates Westway from any other feed company is we use molasses as a carrier. And we use molasses because we want to use liquid sugars. Liquid sugars are fast to digest, high energy, and that's where Westway basically makes a difference. So why would you feed sugars? Most of the time I get a lot of answers on why wouldn't you feed it, right? It's too expensive, it freezes, it doesn't work, right? Well, I'll try to talk about all of those. But basically, we can add whatever into a liquid supplement that any other feed company can do. There's just a little bit more science to it to keep it suspended. Big thing is we prevent sorting, right? We've got a nice volume going into a ration or into a bale. And it improves the dry matter intake. Everything that cows do involves around feed intake. Anything that isn't dry matter is water. Right? So cows need, rule of thumb, they need 2.5% body weight in dry matter. They get any less, they're not going to perform. And the biggest trick of all, cows just like it. That's the biggest trick. Because the thing is, with minerals, dry matter intake is what drives performance. That's the only thing. It's not your mineral. That's wrong. Every feed company, every bag of mineral, everything that's out there that I've seen or that anybody's seen, they've done their homework. We know what cows need. They've done their homework. They put a package together. They put a name on it, and they retail it. The problem is, 80% of the guys where I show up, your cows are not eating what you think they are. Cows need 2.5% dry matter. So if you got a 1,200 pound cow, she needs to eat 30 pounds of dry matter. And most of the time when you do the math, and sometimes it's hard because you're bale feeding or swath grazing, you're not hitting that. So the only thing we do is we make the feed taste a little bit better, supply some more energy, speed up digestibility, up your dry matter intake, and that's what performance can do. This is pictures. So like I said, the difference between cane and beet, cane is triple the price of beet, and the only difference is cane has some fructose and glucose, while beet only has sucrose. These are the ranges what we get our molasses in at. There's basically no, like the protein on the beet here says between 9 and 12.5. The beet we get out of Tabor runs at about 6% protein, so there's really no protein there at all. The dry matter is about 75 to 80%. If we would sell that, if you would take a truckload of cane molasses, we'd put it on the truck in Lethbridge. By the time it's here, you couldn't get it out of the truck. It is so hard and so solid. Cold temperatures it's not manageable. So when we look at sugars, we're looking at 6 carbon sugars. Those are the ones that we focus on. This is where the energy factor is in. The 5 carbon sugars is the sugar content you see on your feed test results. Right? Xylose, you hear xylose? That's like kind of like the sugars in your crop. Right? They're hard to digest. Sure, there's a sugar value, but it's not as easily digestible as the 6 carbon. We'll just go through that. So sugars are highly digestible, right? So the way to look at it is, this is a in vitro, so it's basically like a fake cow stomach. It's just a glass jar. They took room content from the cow, put it in a jar, put sugars in it, looked at the speed of digestibility. So all the sugars in the molasses in the feed that we sell, if you look at this time, so they put 24 hours on for fermentation. The 3 main sugars, sucrose, glucose, and fructose, are all digested in 4 hours. This is the whole trick of why we are feeding molasses. So remember that 4 hours. There's nothing else in the cow's diet that gets digested within the first 4 hours. Not even grains, starches, nothing. The only thing is liquid sugar. So that's all we're doing, is we're basically, if you had an empty cow is completely empty. You start feeding her, the first 4 hours is just gearing up to start digesting. By adding sugar, we give her a head start. That's why we can feed lower quality feed, higher fiber feed, and still get away with the same result. There's just a graph of basically the same as the previous slide. Is that foggy or am I foggy? There. So digestibility goes up right away after feeding on both cane and beef. Another way to calculate digestibility in cows is gas production. So VFA, volatile fatty acids, is basically the gas that is produced by the rumen bugs when they're fermenting feed. So what they've done is they've fed a diet identical, one with no molasses and the other one with 5% molasses. So if the gas production in the rumen goes up, that means that the rumen bugs are working more efficiently, right? So we get better digestibility. So you can see at every point in time, after 1 hour, 2, 3, there's more gas production from the rumen bugs. So digestibility is better. And this is just another graph showing that is the same thing. Like, it's almost identical. Like, beet molasses goes a little higher, but it's almost identical between cane and beet. So this is what I said, after, when we're feeding cows, nothing gets digested in the first 4 hours. So cow eats, hour 0, first thing that gets digested, sugar. About 5 hours in, starches, so your grains. And then your cellulose, right? Your organs. So all we're doing is filling a gap, optimizing feed efficiency. Does that make sense? Questions? Nobody? I'll skip this one. This one's better. So this is another. This is a research that Edie and F. Mann did, and I think it's biased, and I think that too. But what they're looking at is fiber digestibility, NDF digestibility. So lower quality feeds normally have a higher fiber. So they were looking at, okay, if we start adding sugars, what is that going to do to the digestibility? And this is not an on-farm. All these researchers are all like jars and labs, right? Because that's the only way we can really calculate. So what they've done is they've done it on cane molasses. They looked at 8 hours, 10%, 20, and then I don't know why they put this column, because there's not a cow in the world except a dead one that's going to have feeding consistent for 48 hours. So ignore that one. Starch, and this is pure starch, right? It's not grain. They took the starch out. This is pure starch. You're looking at about 15%. The milker product in the bottom is where they combined it. Milk, it's basically a combination of cane and beef. So what you see here, after 24 hours, we have a 25% increase in fiber digestibility. So if guys ask, do cows get plugged up with straw? Yeah, they do. Not with molasses. As long as you add enough molasses to it, not too much, is the recommended feed intake, they will not plug up. And if they do, guarantee something else is going on. Does that make sense? There's just another graph showing the same thing. We're filling that gap in the first 4 hours. We're giving the cow a head start on digesting food. So now let's look at nutrition. The importance of nutrition is underestimated. And I still believe that. We do not see what's going on with the cow until it's too late. Because it's almost impossible to see. The only things that we do see, cows are open, they're contain placenta, stomachs, milk fever, ketosis, you name it. But then it's too late. There's a lot of stuff. 90% of that outcome has happened before. We just didn't notice it. Another thing to remember is cows cannot perform to what they should if they don't get the right minerals and vitamins. That's just the way it is. If you don't feed them that, they're not going to perform the way you want. Even if they eat 100% of what they're supposed to eat. If you don't get the right vitamins and minerals, you will not get results. So what do? We say, okay, let's formulate a diet. We balance the diet. Well, balancing a diet is really simple. Cow's a cow, we know what it needs. Doesn't matter if that cow is in Australia or northern Alberta or Mexico, cow's a cow. Depends a little bit different on breed. The biggest difference is environment, climate. So we know what a cow needs, we know what you have on farm, we fill the gap. So we balance, we formulate a supplement. And then we look at, okay, what would be the recommended feed intake for that? On the molasses, we say 1 to 2 pounds, so that's how we formulate a diet. Now, looking at balancing a diet, I have a lot of questions on, we're in a zinc deficient area, I need more zinc, or I need more selenium, right? That doesn't always make sense. Because the problem is, let's look at zinc. The symbol for zinc is Zn. These are all the interactions between all the different trace minerals and macro minerals internally, right? Into the feed. And either these lines are all connections, right? They're all connections to different elements. These connections are either positive or negative. So if I say I need more zinc, great. Well, that might lower my copper. And if that lowers my copper, what's that going to do to my iron? Right? So this is why we have computer programs. Because we can't calculate a way out of it. And then the next problem is, in this picture, I want more zinc. You're always going to have a limiting factor. So if potassium is your limiting factor, you can add all the zinc you want. It's not going to make a difference. It's going to come up the back end. And this is why we as Westway and a lot of different feed companies have put together, and people call it off-the-shelf products. Well, they're not. They're basically products that fix this. There's a certain level of cows' requirements. We know in general what we're feeding cows. We've made supplements that have high enough levels of all of them. Right? Because if you really look at table 4, and that's like the legal requirement for cattle, we're way above it. And it used to be way worse until like 3 years ago when vitamins were getting short and expensive. Some levels of vitamins we put in minerals are absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. And the reason we use these products is because financially we can't justify making 2,000 different formulas to accommodate with very minute, tiny changes in foraging. Because the facts are that if you're feeding bales, every bale is going to be slightly different, right? So you're never going to be 100% on target. So you need to come up with a product or multiple products that encompass all of that. Does that make sense? Any questions?
So with 1 pound of this molasses, are they getting enough minerals?
Pound to pound and a half. Yeah.
There's no calcium in it, right?
No. There's products that do have calcium.
What's that?
There's products that do have calcium.
What can you put in this one?
Well, there's another product me and Rob were just talking about. There's another product that does have 2% calcium. Yeah. But a healthy cow doesn't need added calcium. It's a band-aid solution. There should be enough calcium in your forages to supply that cow, get up, milk, clean, go. But there's definitely products that have some calcium. The only thing is, calcium is rock. It gets a little harder to work with. Oh, not harder. It's just a little thicker than the product you have now. But it's yeah, we can go as high as I think 10% calcium. But that would more be for feedlot growing animals than cow. Because if you eat 10% calcium in a supplement, there's other issues. So all fun and games, sugars, and but what's it going to do to cows? Yeah.
So if you're feeding a pound or a pound and a half per cow, and
Yes.
you don't need to feed no other
Nope.
minerals,
Nope.
should you be throwing mineral blocks out as well or not?
You don't have.
No?
No. The requirements are met. Yeah.
Would you be feeding salt blocks soon?
Salt never hurts. Yeah. I'd take them out before calving, but that might be
Take the salt away from them, cow.
that might be my dairy farmer instinct kicking in. You'd never give a dairy cow salt 2 months before calving.
Why is that? I have lots of Holsteins.
Oh.
I have like 80.
Utterly. But if you don't have much going on, like in a normal supplement, there should be enough salt for cows, excuse me, to maintain the levels. Added salt is not necessarily but salt's cheap. Normally on beef, like the difference with Holsteins is, like in commercial outfits, they get up the calf and in 9 days they're 40, 50 liters out, right? So you don't want that. In a beef cow, its milk production is a bit lower, so you're not going to have the same effect. So animal performance. That's kind of what we're looking at. So, the effects of different levels of cane molasses on, and let me simplify it, it's the effect of molasses on protein and energy. Right? Because I'm saying add some molasses and we can lower our protein. Right? Cows requirements are about 12%. You feed some molasses, you can't get away with 10, 11. Right? So why is that? So what they've done, another research, they had a base diet, and this is a feedlot diet, right? This is growing steers, and this is a urea ration, so it's a high protein ration, so for growing steers. What they've done, they have a base diet, and feedlot diets, most of them are in percentage, right? So they get 76.6% corn, so on and so on, no molasses. Then what they did, rolled corn is basically their starch, basically their grain, right? They took 5% off and added 5% molasses. Well, they added 10% molasses and then 15%. And then they wanted to see what was going to happen with the energy in the gut. So this is the 5% molasses. What you're looking at, what you want to look, is these two numbers. Dry matter, digestibility, and the energy. Well, 5% molasses, really no change. Right? So, does it do anything? No. I'm looking at 10% molasses. All of a sudden, we're 5% higher in both. There's more energy, and the dry matter is digested faster. It's okay, now let's go to 15%, see what happens. Because if a little bit works, a lot works too, right? Still the same increase. So this is why we're saying, right? This is the 10%, this is the 15. It's almost a negative, right? It works less good. So this is why we're saying, if you treat males, 10% of the bill rate. Not 15, not 5, 10%. Because at 5%, you're not going to see anything. At 10%, you're going to see your optimum. And at 15%, you're just leveling off. So there's no point spending there. Make sense? Now we're looking at milk production. And the only way to calculate milk production is through Holstein, but it's no different for calves. We're looking at milk quality, milk yield, when those calves are born, get up, start sucking and growing, right? Because the first 30 days, they're going to make or break that calf. You got a calf on the ground that doesn't take off, he's never going to catch up. So those first 30 days are crucial. So the only way to look at milk production is to go through dairy research because it's controlled. So what I hate about these is they all use these, and like I said, English is not my first language, but why do they make these words so incredibly long? I don't understand. Basically what it says, we used 24 cows, they had an average production of 41 kgs a day, and they were all fed the same diet. What they did is they took 4 groups with 6 cows and did the same test. So what did they do? I'm saying, and I told Robin, you can replace some starch with molasses. Pound of grain equals pound of molasses. Right? So if you would normally be feeding 5 pounds of grain to cows, and now you're feeding pound of molasses, you get the same results, or better, by feeding 4 pounds of grain to pound of molasses. Same thing. So this research shows that. This is a diet. This is just what they were feeding, and all they did is they looked here, they had 7.5% grain, starch, and no molasses. And they replaced it 1 to 1. 5% starch, 2.5% sugar. And then they, basically by the end of it, they replaced the starch with the sugar. Does that make sense? Great, so another way to look at it, if I had 7.5 pounds of grain, now I have 5 pounds, 2.5 pounds of sugar, 2.5 pounds of grain, 5 pounds of sugar, so on. So they looked at it, and the only way to look at milk production is to look at these numbers. Milk per dry matter intake. So it basically means liter of milk per kilogram of dry matter intake. So the lower that number, the more efficient that cow is. So 1.59, this is the optimum number, because here we're slacking off, right? So this is the most efficient. It took 1.53 kgs of dry matter to produce 1 liter of milk. Right? So again, more is not always better. Basically what I just said is the conclusion. Penn State is doing a lot of research with Westway. It's funny, the only reason I put it in is because it's the same product that Robin has here. They fed it to Holstein heifers, so feedlot setting. Everything the same, they just dumped in almost 32. And on average, they went from 2.28 average day of the game to pounds per day, 2.9. And why is that? It's adding energy. It's all in. These suckers are just growing faster, eating more. That's it. So now the last bit, now this is kind of what I've been trying to tell all my dealers. If you always always did what we've always done, you always get what you always got. So I'm just looking to see if we can change things up. Right now, we're dry. Everything's expensive. There's no feed, quality's less. Can't afford to feed cows.